Alright, what's up guys? New deck profile today. Fresh, brand new Banlist. Huge news for Counter Fairies. We got back 3 copies of the best counter trap ever printed, Solemn Judgement. I only have one Ghost Rare because I didn't know, this Banlist was going to happen, obviously. But basically, I filmed this video actually yesterday before the Banlist happened. And then it came out this morning. Fantastic news, and making it again. Very excited to play this deck in this format. I think it's a lot better. A lot of decks got nerfed really heavily, so I'm definitely excited to play this deck and show you guys what I've gotten here so far. Alright, first we've got Ernight Parshath's father, Sacred Archangel Parshath. Basically, if you activate a counter trap or negate the activation of a spell or trap card or a monster effect, you can banish 2 fairies from your graveyard or in your hand, or if this card can be in the graveyard when you activate that card, so it can either be in the graveyard or in your hand. When you activate this effect, you can banish cards from your graveyard or your hand and special summon it. And then when it does piercing just like original Ernight Parshath, but when it inflicts battle damage, you search a counter trap from your deck. It is slightly too slow. But it's definitely a very good, it's like a decent boss monster. Of all of the ones that got printed recently, it's definitely no Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, but it is a decent one. We play one of him because we do not play Pot of Desires. We're not worried about banishing him. So he's kind of like our win condition, sort of. Although usually just stopping your opponent and attacking with a bunch of fairies is the win condition. But he's like our boss monster. We only play one. We're not worried about banishing him because like I said, we're not playing Pot of Desires anymore. We're not playing the old slow build of Pot of Desires and Card of Demise. We're not doing that anymore. They used to be the most frustrating thing. You can't special summon the turn you activate. Card of Demise, they used to be a nightmare. We are playing Pot of Extravagance. We've moved on. Next, we've got 3 copies of Bountiful Artemis, probably the top 3 of the best cards in the deck. Each time a counter trap is activated, immediately after it resolves, draw 1 card. So broken. This is what fuels all of your resources. Anytime you activate Ties of the Brethren, you definitely want to put one of these on the board every single time. Not by far the best card in the deck, but it's definitely up there. Next, we've got Power Angel Valkyria. I play one of this. Again, we can play one-ofs now. We're not worried about banishing things. If you negate the activation of a spell or trap card or monster effect, add 1 light monster from your deck to your hand, hard once per turn. Very good card. This card actually came out, I think, in the structure deck. This card is good for, it adds resources to your hand. It makes some of your counter traps live. For example, we are playing the Ultimate Offering. Sometimes you need to add a monster to negate a monster effect, so it makes that live. But definitely a very, very good card there. Again, we play it at 1 because we have options. You can Ties of the Brethren into any of these monsters. You don't have to play them at 3 if you're not playing Pot of Desires. 1 Minerva, Scholar of the Sky. Each time a counter trap is activated, immediately this card gains 500, so it can really, and that's not once per turn, it can get up to some seriously, huge attack. It's not uncommon to have a Minerva 35, 4,000, very easily. And not to mention, it gains attack points from the spell card, the Sanctum of Parshath. It gains attack through that, and you also play Honest in the deck, so, I mean, this card can get kind of huge. And then this card, when Sanctuary of the Sky is on the field, gains an additional effect. You can, when this card, if Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field and you activate a counter trap, you can add a counter trap with a different name from your graveyard to your hand, so it has some recursion, which is very, very important, very good. Next, we've got 1 Minerva, Sage of the Sky. Each time a counter trap is activated, immediately gain 1,000 life points. Remember, sometimes you'll have to be paying life points if you don't have Glide and Ariadne. You do have to pay life points. And if you do, you pay 1,000 life points, and if Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, you also get to pop a card on your opponent's side of the field. And I believe that effect doesn't even target. Yeah, it doesn't. Destroy 1 card your opponent controls. Doesn't even target. Really good. Next, we've got 3 copies of Glide and Ariadne. This card makes the deck So smooth. I love this card. All right, number one, it's Pendulum Effect. Its Pendulum Scale Effect is that you don't have to pay basically cost for any of your counter traps. You don't have to pay life points, number one, and number two, you don't have to discard cards if that if the card says it. Which love those two effects. They're awesome. And then if this card, let's say you summon it off of where is it? Ties to the Brethren. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you get to reveal three counter traps to your opponent, and your opponent chooses one, adds it to your hand, and the rest gets shuffled in. Both effects are just fantastic. This card is actually decent in decks like True Dracos and stuff because they can pop this with Diagram, but that's not relevant here. Most of the time you'll be using this for the Pendulum Effect, so you don't have to pay any cost for anything. Next, we've got One Honest. You can summon Honest off of Ties of the Brethren, and normally you'd be like, why would you do that? This card lets you bounce itself back to your hand at any time, so you can use Ties of the Brethren on Bountiful Artemis to summon a Honest and we'll go with a Minerva, Meltiel. So we'll summon those three, for example, and then you can bounce back the Honest back to your hand, and now you have those two on the field, and you can make the Honest, gain attack equal to your opponent's attack, which is pretty good. Pretty nice, cool play. And we've got one Zeratius, also could be a Ties to the Brethren target, but normally you just discard it to search the Sanctuary in the Sky. Then we've got one Barrier Statue of the Heavens. This is a really scary card to play against. Sometimes your deck just doesn't have an out to it, and you'll have to waste a normal summon on a card that maybe you don't want to. You'll waste a normal summon on a dumb card to try to get over this card, and you play 3 Solemn Judgments now, so you can stop that normal summon, and then it's basically like an auto win against those decks. It really is. I love this is like a walking floodgate. Sometimes you just put it on the field, and your opponent really doesn't have any way to beat over it. And it's actually a really cool combo. Let's say you have Bountiful Artemis, and you Ties of the Brethren and Bountiful Artemis. You summon a Barrier Statue of the Heavens, and then you summon a where is he? Honest. So you summon these 3 off of Ties of the Brethren, and then you bounce the Honest, and now your opponent, even if they normal something bigger than this, they can't get over it because of Honest. So you just kind of screwed them there. Very good against Orcus. I don't know what Orcus is going to do. They're scrambling right now to try to figure out a build without Bardish. But their losses are gain, I guess. Same thing with other decks. It's just it really is an auto win against certain decks. What's it called? Against Sky Strikers, for example, because Ray is a dark that goes into fires and waters and stuff like that. So it's kind of a tough card to beat over. Like if they hard draw or search out the Widow Anchor, you could still get over it. But it really is, against certain decks, it really is a solid auto win. So that's Barrier Statue of the Heavens. Those are all of the monsters in the deck. Next, we've got the spells. 3 copies of the Sanctum of Parshath. I'm trying to avoid the glare there. Basically, what this card does is it's Sanctuary in the Sky, so all those cards that I talked about earlier get their bonus effects. And then all fairy monsters on your side of the field gain 300 attack defense, which is important. It's not a huge boost, but it's important. And and then your spell and trap cards are protected from being targeted or destroyed, which is really cool. So let's say they activate a card that's like Harpy's Feather Duster, for example, that doesn't target but destroys, protects from that. And then let's say they have something like Nightmare Unicorn, for example, that targets and then shuffles it back into the deck. Again, it doesn't affect that, which is really cool. And then its other effect is you can target 3 fairy monsters and or counter traps, and then place them on the top of your deck in any order, which is good because you reoccur them. You can pick your next draw, and that's kind of important when you're playing the Bountiful Artemis. It's important because you pick your next draw. It helps out. So this card, it's good, but it really doesn't this card isn't really a +1. It just exists, and that's kind of the problem with it. But it's still, at least it's Sanctuary in the Sky, and it does a whole lot of little things, but it doesn't really do anything big. but the little things really add up. But 3 copies of the Sanctum of Parshath. Next, we're playing 1 Sanctuary in the Sky. We search it off of, what was that, Zeradius? Yeah, we search it off of Zeradius, but additionally, you don't take any battle damage involving fairies, which, comes up here and there, especially when you're playing in time and your opponent's like, you gain life points with, was it Maltiel or Minerva? Yeah, Maltiel. You gain life points with Maltiel, like you gain 1,000, and then they try to attack over you, and you can't inflict anything. But it's pretty decent in that regard. We play our only draw card, 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. You don't understand how much I hated playing the Card of Demise and the Card of Demise engine with the with Pot of Desires. Oh my god, it was so frustrating because you'd open Card of Demise with Ties of the Brethren, and you'd be sitting there like, which one do I do? Like seriously, like, which one do I do? Like, it countered the entire point of the deck. Like, you couldn't special summon Air Knight. You couldn't activate the counter trap that special summons Air Knight. You couldn't special summon cards from your hand. Like, it was frustrating because it did give you a lot of advantage, but at the same time you couldn't like do anything with it. On top of that, if you drew too many monsters, then Card of Demise would be kind of like useless. But this card like fixed all of that. But yeah, I like it quite a bit. I like this. I like Pot of Extravagance a lot more. Now, if you're looking for budget options, I guess you have to change this build to the old build. Like, seriously, do not follow this guide and then expect not to play Pot of Extravagance, because in all seriousness, you cannot play all of these cards at one. All these cards that I'm showing you in the background here, you can't play these cards at one because you're going to banish them off of Pot of Desires, and then you're not going to have access to them. You need to, if you plan to play all these cards at one, then you have to play the Pot of Extravagance. If you plan on playing Desires, then you can easily play all these cards at one. So that is the Pot of Extravagance. Next, we've got 3 copies of Ties of the Brethren. Ties of the Brethren, basically you target a monster, and then you summon another monster with the same attribute and type and level as that monster. So you can target any of our level 4s that I showed you earlier, and then summon any other 2 level 4s from the deck. They all synergize perfectly with that. The only thing you can't summon is the Archangel, I think it's a level 8, whatever level it is. Pretty sure it's maybe even more than 8, I don't know. I'm not going to sit and count it, but it doesn't synergize with it. Next, fresh from the list, 3 copies of Super Polymerization. So excited to play this card. This card doesn't have a lot of going second options, and to be 100% honest with you, the biggest threat to us is the biggest threat to us is Thunder Dragons. By far, Thunder Dragons are the biggest threat to this deck. Thunder Dragons, and I don't know, like I have to look at the rest of the meta, but Thunder Dragons, I think Work is definitely going to be still pretty prevalent, but definitely Thunder Dragons are our biggest threat. And going first or going second, this is a very, very good card against Thunder Dragons. Basically, it prevents them from... It destroys their board, number one, or on the way to building a board, sometimes you can, eradicate their board, which is very good. But that's it. Those are all the spells. Let's move on to the counter traps. I think all the traps we play are counter traps. We play 3 copies, and I've waited years to say this, of Solemn Judgement. Like I said, I made this deck list actually last night, and I only had 1 copy. I only had 1 copy of Solemn Judgement. I was playing this Ghost Rare because I picked it up a couple of days ago. I'm like, I'll make the deck profile. But then I'm like, and then this list dropped, and which I didn't expect, and now I had to, put in these kind of BLLR, I think. Yeah, the BLBR Solemn Judgments, and I actually have the original print somewhere in a binder, but I wasn't ready for this. But there you go, Solemn Judgement, 3 copies, pay half your life points, and negate basically anything. Summon a monster or the activation of a spell or trap. Incredible card, number 1. Number 2, with Glide and Ariadne, you don't have to pay anything, which is awesome. But great for somebody, stops basically any summon and any spell or trap card activation. Oh yeah, and quick comment. This is probably one of the only one of the only back row decks that doesn't lose to evenly matched. Like, no one cares about evenly matched. You have so many ways to stop evenly matched that it doesn't even matter. They can't bait out. They can't really bait you out because a lot of their cards, they have to normal summon to activate an effect, and the problem with that is you might not negate something, and now they've normal summoned a monster, they've activated the effect, you went, alright, go ahead, it goes through, now they're evenly matched and their hand is dead. So this card, I mean, this deck really, like it really can't be evenly matched. If you play smart, you really can't lose to evenly matched. Next, we play 3 copies of Solemn Strike. One of the other better counter traps. Stops inherent summons, meaning like special summons off themselves, stuff like Blackluster Soldier, you know, like a Link summon, an XYZ summon, stuff like that. Be very careful. Like if your opponent, for example, activates a ritual card, ritual spell to summon a monster, you can't strike that. If they activate like a fusion spell, like polymerization or something, to summon a monster, you can't strike that, but you can stop an inherent summon from the extra deck. Also, of course, stops monster effects. It can stop hand traps. It literally stops a monster effect that activates virtually anywhere. Banish zone, graveyard, hand, field, even from the extra. Like, it literally stops an effect from anywhere. Of course, it's speed spell 3, so your opponent can't even respond. Well, they can respond, but the only thing they can respond with is another counter trap, which virtually no one plays. And we've got 1 copy of Solemn Warning. I think this is the next card. Take it off the list, Konami. This is next. Bring this to 3, and we have the trifecta ready to go. 1 copy of Solemn Warning. I thought about playing the Solemn Scolding, but I was like, nah, there's really no point. I had it ready here. I was gonna play it instead of like I said, I built this deck yesterday, and I was going to play this instead of the Solemn Judgments, but they moved to 3, so what's the point, right? So 1 Solemn Warning. This stops virtually any summon. So in some ways it's better than Strike, in some ways it's worst. It stops inherent summons, and it stops summons off of cards. If there's a card that would create a summon, it stops that. So it even stops like random stuff like Macrocosmos, and it stops even like spell cards that would summon a monster. Stops normal summons. It stops special summons. It basically stops any summon. So it's very, very good. At the cost of 2,000 life points, of course. Then we've got 3 copies of Rebirth of Pershath. Alright, so I play 3. Some people play 2, some people play 1. I think that's the wrong move. Play 3. This card is in a lot of ways your win condition, and when you have Gliding Ariadne on the field, it is I think it's probably like a +1, because you're negating your opponent's card, using your card, and then you summon a monster. So yeah, it's a +1 if you have Gliding Ariadne on the field. So this card, you reveal a counter trap, which is probably the steepest stipulation about this card, the part that I really don't like. But you reveal a counter trap. Then you discard 1 card and pay 1,000 life points, which if you have Gliding Ariadne on the field, you don't have to pay either of those costs. And honestly, I think the pay 1,000 stipulation is kind of like useless. Like, why even have that? You know, you're already discarding a card. What's the point? And then you negate the activation of a spell or monster effect or trap. So basically any effect. And then after this card resolves, you can special summon a Pershath monster from your deck or extra deck, which would be Avenging Knight Pershath, or let me pull it out. The other one, Sacred or Air Knight Pershath. Those are the ones we're playing. You can, of course, summon the slightly smaller one, or you can summon the original Air Knight Pershath, which you won't because you'll summon these 2. But I love the way that they wrote that card, because it future-proofs it. This card is actually future-proofed. It just summons 1 Pershath monster. If they release one tomorrow, they announce a Pershath monster tomorrow, it's ready to be summoned off this card. So this card can potentially even get better. But I think it's pretty good now. Next, we've got 3 copies of Divine Punishment. This card, when a spell trap card or effect is activated, basically another Solemn Judgment. If you have Sanctuary in the Sky on the field, you just negate it for free, no cost whatsoever. You just got to have 1 of your 4 copies. Technically, we have 5 copies. We have a Zeratius, we have the spell card version, and we have the spell card back here. the Sanctum of Parshath. So technically we have 5 copies of a Sanctuary in the Sky, any of those, and you can negate for free. Then we have 2 copies of Ultimate Providence. Basically, this card, when your opponent activates a spell, trap, or monster effect, you can discard one of those cards from your hand and negate the activation. Again, if you have Glide and Ariadne, you don't have to pay any cost, so none of that matters. But it's basically like a invoked Mechaba, but in counter trap form, which is really cool. And remember, counter traps can only be stopped with other counter traps. Your opponent can't really respond to anything. Next, let's go to the ever exciting extra deck. We play 3 copies of Avenging Knight Parshath. Like I said, we're playing Pot of Extravagance, so we're playing 3 of everything, because it really doesn't matter. I don't mind banishing, play 3 of everything, and really, it's not a huge deal if you banish 1 or 2, but you want to have these options open, so we play 3 of that. Play 3 copies of Hippo Shinnigan. Basically, this is a link to for lights. Points down twice, nice arrows, nice, it's a nice card. All lights gain 500 attack, defense, which matters because your monsters aren't gigantic, but like they gain attack through all these various boosts. Also has some synergy. It's a fairy, various other problems. Various other, good things. It works well with Sanctuary in the Sky. It gains attack off of Sanctum, the Sanctum of Parshath. It has positive synergies about it. And then when this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can add a light monster back to your hand, which again, beautiful, beautiful synergy. Next, we play 3 copies. These are all instant fusion targets from here on in of Diplexer Chimera. I don't know where Salamangreats are headed. I don't know if they're going to be quite as good as they were. They probably, they're still a good deck, don't get me wrong. But basically, I've been telling this to people all day. If you have a Call by the Grave and they use a Gazelle as cost for a Link Summon, you basically win. Because you're just going to Call by the Grave that one Gazelle. They have no way to get that Gazelle back. But we play Diplexer Chimera. You can play, of course, the Violent... was it Violent Chimera? Yeah, you can play the Salamangreat Fusion Monster as a super polymerization target. I prefer this because it has slightly more versatility. And then, it can tribute itself off the field, and then you can go with your fairy plays. Let's say you want to use the extra monster zone for something else. This card can tribute 1 Cybers monster, which, can be itself, and then you can just get it off the field like that, and then your opponent can't activate things during the battle phase, which most of the time they won't activate anything during the battle phase, but it's good. It's a decent effect to have on it. But yeah, definitely. 3 of that because you never know what you're going to face. There are other decks that use Cybers monsters. Also, like I said, I want to future-proof this deck at least a little bit. With Marincesses coming out in like 2 weeks, this can work against them, and it can work against Salamangreat. So, a little more versatility there. We got 3 copies of Starving Venom Dragon. This card is, of course, very, very good against Orchist and any deck that uses dark monsters, but especially our arch nemesis, the absolutely atrocious Thunder Dragons. Basically, they get so many decks to lose their boss monsters and win conditions, even though they never get hit. But Thunder Dragons, you can fuse their cards away, their end boards. Definitely a very usable card. Then its effect is decent. It gains attack equal to their monster. When it's destroyed, you can basically wipe their field, but pretty good. 2 copies of Mud Dragon of the Swamps. This card is just 2 monsters with different attributes. Very versatile, good against a lot of different decks. Super poly target, and then 1 copy of Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. Now you're probably wondering, why in the world would you only play 1 copy of Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon? Because, remember, even though you're playing Pot of Extravagance, you can still, let's say your opponent ends and they end on their pendulum board, which is usually going to be pretty massive. You can, because you're not playing any hand traps, you can standby phase activate super polymerization, and then use their monsters to use usually their Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon and another pendulum monster they have on the field to make to fuse away. Usually that is what you do against them, and then after the standby phase in main phase 1, you activate Pot of Extravagance to banish 6 to draw 2 cards. So you can still dodge around. You only have to play 1 because you only really need to use Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon when you're going second. So when you're going second, it's a way of interrupting, breaking your opponent's board. Always activate this during the standby phase because then you are able to still activate this in main phase 1 because this card has to activate in main phase 1. But yeah, that's why we only play 1 of that. And then off to the side deck. For the side deck, it's basically it's a side deck that lets us go second. This entire deck is built to go first, so our side deck is just built to go second. 3 copies of Dino Wrestler Pangotrops, good against, this is good against a lot of decks. Going second, it can help you break a board. It's a 2600 attack special summon. It pops a card and tributes itself. The tribute is a quick effect, so they can't Veiler or Ash or do anything. Very good card. Gets rid of also, what do they call it? Like annoying, pesky floodgates, stuff like that. Definitely a very good card. 3 copies of Lancia. This is against any deck that banishes Thunder Dragon, stuff like that. 3 copies of Gamma. 1 copy of where's that? 1 copy of Driver. Again, it's good going second. If you know you're going second, you side this in, side out whatever counter traps won't work against your opponent, stuff like that. Pretty darn good card. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say. It's basically like a Solemn Strike, but during your opponent's turn. We play 2 copies of Red Reboot because it's semi-searchable. It's good against back row decks. It's searchable with like Air Knight Parshath when it attacks and a few other cards, but if you're playing against a really aggressive back row deck, something like Altergeist, you want to negate that card and you want to set up your own board, and then you just want to wreck their board the following turn. Definitely important. And then we've got, of course, the Evenly Matched. Very, very key card against vicious, aggressive back row decks. Not against counter fairies, because counter fairies don't lose to Evenly Matched, because we have 11 ways, as you can see. I play 14 counter traps. We have 14 ways in this deck to basically stop Evenly Matched. Well, actually not 14, because Strike doesn't stop Evenly Matched, and neither does Warning. So I guess we have like 10 ways to stop Evenly Matched. But most other back row decks cannot do it. So we play the Evenly Matched for them. And that is deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Put a lot of thought into this one. Subscribe if you enjoy this and if you enjoy other content like this. And thank you for watching.